This is Open Studio, a podcast where I invite artists that I know and admire to join me for unfiltered conversations about all things creative. My guest today is Shira and I. She's a photographer, a filmmaker, a painter, a musician, and just an all-around creative person who's currently based in Prague, and it was a huge pleasure to have her on the podcast. Go and check out her amazing work. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Also, if you haven't already, please go and check out my Patreon page. It's a great way to stay connected with everything that I'm working on, and a subscription, even in the smallest amount, makes a huge difference to me. With that, let's get into it.
I think we've only met once.
Yeah.
Maybe twice.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Like, I think I ran into you in the street at one point. But that was like quite a while ago. So I would love to hear, maybe just to start, a little bit about like when you started to feel like a creative person, like when that was something that you identified as at whatever point in your life. And then maybe like where the journey has taken you up until this point, like where you're at now.
Okay. So when I started to feel like a creative person, I guess when I was a kid, I always had these instincts. Like, it really was like the one area in like all of school and things, like growing up and things that you do when you're a kid, that I was like felt inclined to do. Like, nothing could really keep my attention so well as like the art and music stuff and like the play acting things and just like the creative things really of any kind. I don't know. I guess it didn't occur to me for a long time that I could be an artist. Like, this was something that didn't occur to me at all really growing up. I was kind of afraid of it because of this trope that you would hear all the time about like, oh, you're going to grow up and like be a starving artist. And like when you're a kid, that sounds really scary. You know?
It is scary. Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't think it's easy for anybody anywhere, like so much all the time, you know? But yeah, this is really scary. This was really scary advice that I would hear, I guess, growing up. And so it was just something I never felt that I could spend my energy going towards, like at a professional level. And then I was in my undergrad for like a really long time, like studying things that weren't art.
Sure.
And psychology, actually. And I was just like, well, I'm like not fulfilled in this.
Yeah.
And like seeing the arts building all the time and being like, why am I not in the arts building? I feel like I should be in the arts building. Like, how can I access this? But then also still like keeping sustainability in mind.
Trying to be realistic as well.
Yeah, sure. And so after a long time, I switched to the communication design department because I felt like this was like a practical application of my creative skills, like inherently.
Sure.
And I mean, yeah, designers are like necessary.
That's true.
Like, I mean, not to say that nobody is like not necessary, but you know what I mean? Like in capitalism, I guess.
They're more accepted, let's say.
Yeah. I don't really know how to put that, but design is cool. But yeah, when I made this transition, I kind of like declared to myself that regardless of what happens or how the journey goes, like I will just stay. Like I will have to stay with it and just keep moving forward. So I guess in that moment, I was like, okay, you're an artist and you're a designer. Like you must now keep going, even if it may be challenging at times. So
was there like one specific turning point? Because that's a pretty big change to make, to be like in a program or like a degree that you're not that fulfilled by, and then all of a sudden to be like, oh, fuck it, like I'm gonna change and do this instead. Like, was there something that happened to you, or like an experience you had, or was it kind of just like accumulation of many things?
It kind of was already there. Like, it was already there because actually I was active in like the creative community, like outside of school.
Okay. Yeah.
And like where I'm from, we had like a pretty like progressive DIY community. So I was like involved in this to some degree. And then, so like changing was just like kind of like a personal commitment, like more full commitment.
Yeah, sure.
Because I was like frustrated a lot too that things that weren't art were like deterring from doing art. So I guess this was like the frustration which motivated me.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, just generally I'm kind of like this is like frustration is like hugely motivating for me.
It can
I
be,
have
yeah.
to say.
Yeah.
So, and that was a long time ago now. And actually, and design was an interesting thing because sometimes in hindsight, I was like, well, maybe I should have pursued painting more seriously or like illustration more seriously because that's actually what I was like originally inclined towards. And entering design, I had a lot of like fear, I guess, that maybe at the time I wasn't willing to admit. And by fear, I mean like I was not acclimated with like the technology at all because like it was like my first exposure to like Adobe software of any kind and like Photoshop of any kind. So it took me a while to learn these things. But now, since then, and now they're like, I mean, the skills are there, and that's like a really exciting thing to reflect on now.
It's super useful to have those skills and to be able to use those tools. Like, even if it's not something that you want to do all the time, like, I feel like it can definitely help you.
Yeah.
What was it like when you switched into the design program? Because you were talking about, okay, like being more inclined towards painting and fine art and illustration. Did the design program kind of scratch that itch for you, or did you still feel like there was something missing?
Well, I was able to take some like fine art electives like during this.
Okay.
So I took printmaking and then I took like a higher level drawing courses, like as far as I could go with that, that the credits would allow anyway. And then regarding illustration, I encountered like really big challenge like during my studies in this program because like after I made this transition and like switched, it was like maybe a year or two into the design program that the university was like, okay, actually we're changing from a state college to like a university, which maybe sounds cool, but when they do that, like the whole curriculum changes. So I entered this program like thinking that I was going to have like an illustration focused course.
Sure, yeah.
And also I entered like thinking that I would have like an animation focused course too. And so that the fact that they transformed from like a BA to a BFA, it was like, okay, now all of a sudden we don't have color theory anymore. All of a sudden we don't have illustration anymore, but we do have this like art theory and crit course that you got to write this massive paper for instead.
Which it sounds like not what you were in it for. That's not what you were interested in.
No, that wasn't. Yeah, I can honestly say that's not really what I wanted to be spending my time on.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
It sounds awful.
So, and at that point, I was just like, okay, I guess I will just have to go with it and finish. I mean, that's like the most important. It was the most important thing at that point.
Yeah, sure.
So, and actually something, I think the best thing that I was able to take with me from this experience was that even though I was upset that they like took away illustration course, because originally it was like you had to choose between photography and illustration. Like these were like what you needed to choose from, like within a design context.
Yeah.
And so they took away illustration, but then I was required to take photography, and at that time I wasn't keen on it at all. but it actually like changed my life. Like it was one of the most important experiences of like my creative career.
Yeah.
Because it was in this, I didn't really understand photography before I did this course. And so through that, I gained like a lot greater insight and more respect towards it as a craft, and also learned that I had quite a skill for it that I wasn't aware of before.
Yeah.
And that like took me some places sometimes eventually. So
Can you pinpoint what it was about photography that like you resonated with, or you still resonate with?
for me, it was just like, I think it was just like the most honest expression of like of my vision.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I didn't really know if I was doing a quality thing or not. Like I was
Sure.
kind of just, I really was just like figuring out how the mechanism worked, and, you know, taking photos of things that I thought were interesting, of course. But then, I don't know, I was like getting like really good feedback about like the content of like, how do I say? There's like a, like, it's like where all like the little images are on, probably some photographer might watch this and they will like be like yelling.
You mean like before you develop the photos? Or you're talking about something totally different?
Like on your negative roll, and then it's like before you put it in like the enlarger, and you just like make an exposure of all of these little like thumbnails.
Okay.
So
yeah,
you
I have
know
no idea what that's called. Yeah.
what your contact sheet. Wow.
Nice. You found it.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the content of my contact sheets were quite, I don't know. She had like really, my teacher had really positive things to say about them. And that like they had kind of like a Lynchian, like David Lynch quality.
Hell
which
yeah. That's
I
awesome.
I know.
I love David
She
Lynch.
was like, you know, I think your work has this like David Lynch sort of quality. And I was like, whoa, oh my God, wow. That's like the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me.
It's a huge compliment.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, but also at this time, like when I was discovering this, I was in Colorado, which is where I'm from. And Colorado is like known for really like vast and majestic wilderness. And then also this kind of like centennial aesthetic flair, like
Okay.
like Victorian homes and like things like this,
Sure,
like
yeah.
in the urban setting. So when I was getting into photography, I could also spend a lot of time like playing around with this and like really capturing how I felt in this place, which was so familiar to me at
Yeah.
the time. But since, I don't know, my relationship actually with photography changed since I like moved away from home, I should say.
In what way?
Well, everything, I mean, nothing was familiar anymore. So then I didn't really know how to like approach things with like so much confidence as I did at home, like in capturing like things and people. And like, I don't know. And I think fear and distance maybe even started to become apparent like in my captures.
Wow, interesting.
And not because I was like overtly like capturing like fearful content or something,
yeah.
but because of where I can like assess myself in the positioning of the frame, like as the photographer, like I was like very far away from everything, and like, and my subjects were like not close.
That's so interesting. I mean, it sounds like a subconscious reaction, not something maybe that you planned or thought about.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like an indication of how you were feeling,
Yeah.
in the sense that you didn't feel intimately connected to the subject matter anymore.
Yeah. I mean, of course, in that moment, you know, this wasn't like occurring to me.
Right.
Like, I'm just in the moment, I was just like, well, I just got to keep like practicing. I mean, because this is kind of like how I think with everything. I'm like, okay, I just got to keep practicing. Like,
Of course.
keep taking the shots, like, keep drawing the pictures, keep doing the design exercise, just keep active.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like to myself, but then like in hindsight, and then when you like observe the work later, it's like, oh, this is what was going on with me maybe, and like this was what was going on before, and like and how is the progression of this shifting now?
To me, that's, sorry to interrupt you, but to me, that's like one of the most interesting things about looking back on like early paintings of mine. And this is part of the reason that I love having like, it's almost like a personal like diary in a way of like different periods in your life if you're continuously making things. Because I'll look back on some of the early stuff I did and it's so dark in terms of like the colors. And like part of the reason was because I just didn't know how to mix colors very well, but I think it also was a representation of how I was feeling at the time, and I didn't recognize it when I was doing it. It wasn't something I was conscious of, but now looking back I'm able to perceive that. And the interesting thing for me now is that like I can't perceive what I'm making now in the context of my own life, right? It's like, it's too subjective.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is one of the things that continuously motivates me, is knowing that in 3 years or 5 years, I will be able to look back and go, oh shit, that makes sense. Like, that's why I was using those colors or painting these things.
Sure.
And like, I love the idea of being able to do that for the rest of my life, basically, like continuously have that like personal diary.
Yeah. I think it's like absolutely necessary in like the longevity of like someone's career to like have these references. Definitely. And like, and feeling that way, I was always like really anxious when I felt like I was like starting to get out of practice or like falling away from things because of, I don't know, some circumstantial life, whatever, and like the further you fall away from it, like the harder it is to like come back, it feels like.
Absolutely.
And then if you do manage to make it back, like, do you still have an audience anymore? And I mean, I don't like, people will argue that the audience is not the most important thing and that you should do things for yourself. But I think audience is really important, and they motivate me to not give up in the moments that sometimes I'm really like discouraged.
For sure. Yeah. It's like external validation is definitely important, like for me as well. And I always kind of like preach this message of like, I do make because I want to, like I do it for myself, but there's also like another side of that I don't talk about, which is like also the reality of trying to survive as an artist, which requires me to build an audience and connect with people. And also I have an ego, and that means that like I need validation from people sometimes, whether or not I want to admit it. It is a nice thing to have.
Yes.
And like you're saying, I think the idea of losing that is really scary. Like it's all, for me, it's like recently it's been a lot about like trying to build momentum. And like finally, as I'm building momentum now, like when I have moments where there's a dip in my confidence or something, like whatever's happening and I don't feel like I'm as creative or I'm not as like fulfilled by what I'm doing, it's even scarier to think about quitting, because I feel like I'd be losing so much more after having built the momentum, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Also, the momentum thing, it's really important not to lose it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. And is that something you feel like you're losing now? Because I know just before we were talking a little bit about like the place you're in right now in your school and like the stuff that you're going through.
Yeah, well, currently my art practice is just like really different than what it was before I came to school.
Okay.
And it was different for a long time. Like before I moved to Prague, actually, I was like quite disciplined in just being active daily. And not really thinking of like anything else, just like it was in my routine. And then when I moved, I guess I fell out of my routine. I mean, I guess that's to be expected when you like immigrate to a new country, you know?
I'd be surprised if you didn't, honestly.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're like really far from your routine. Shock. You know? And so that happened, and I kind of was like accepting this, and I mean, attempting to keep going, but it was really like slowed down. And then I had an opportunity where I started to do like performance art here because I met some people. And this was really great actually, because even before I was like, I should be serious about being a visual artist. I was actually really serious about dance and like theater.
Wow, okay.
And this was actually, when I was much younger, the thing that I really was like, my dreams.
Wow, interesting. And is that something you kind of like lost along the way that you didn't do?
Yeah, because this also requires a lot of dedication. And so, you know, when you grow up, you maybe have to like prioritize some things. And sadly, as I got older, it became less and less of a priority for like circumstantial reasons, of course. And to the point actually where I was like, maybe this is just not like accessible anymore, or maybe I should just not even have this in my mind anymore. And so but then after coming out here, I started to have these opportunities to like participate in these things. And so it was kind of like, I don't know, I took it in this way like, maybe this is a sign that you should like keep going, or like keep trying, because obviously to myself, like, you still love this, you still wish for it, and now you have some chances, and so maybe take this as a sign to keep moving forward with it. So since then, I have been doing performance more instead of like only just like the visual thing. Like I've been doing performance again, and like also incorporating like other media and like other experiments that I can like put together with that.
So you're combining things.
Yeah. But I don't know, institutionally, I mean, it's the same. I think it's like the same struggle that I had in my previous school. Like, I feel like I can't spend the time actually with the artwork that I need because also is required like this academic aspect of it, which I'm not. It's really hard. I don't know. Maybe for some people it's easy, but for me, it's really like, it feels like pulling teeth sometimes, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
And it's not like the literature isn't interesting, and it's not like I don't enjoy these things that I discover sometimes, like through text and like observation and just like taking it all in, of course. But to like spend the time sitting down to craft a paper instead of spending the time sitting down to like craft the actual artifact is something which is very challenging to me.
Me too. I can relate to that, absolutely. And I know, like, especially when I went to film school, like when I started film school, I was very passionate about film, and it was something that I wanted to do because I felt it and I liked storytelling in that medium. And then like going to school for it, because the school that I went to was so theory based, like it became, I started like to stop feeling what I was making, and I started to kind of like hyper rationalize everything.
Sure.
And then I lost that like kind of spark that I used to associate with making film, and it really ruined it for me. And then like when I left, I was like, fuck it, I don't want to do film anymore. And I mean like I do little stupid videos, but like I don't really do film in the way that I thought I would, because it became too rational for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're like me, but like I'm also a very stubborn person. So if somebody tells me, if there's like some element of authority saying to me that I need to be thinking about something in a certain way or writing about this thing or being critical, I shut down.
Sure.
Like it really
Yes.
turns me off to that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel this also. Like I feel like now I'm in a place of like over rationalizing everything, and in the institution, like everything is so like conceptually based, and this is like what contemporary art is now, and like the training is to be in it seems in my experience so far that the training is to be in like the gallery space. Like this is what our exams every semester are addressing, is like how well we handle ourselves and our work like in the group exhibition, you know? Like
What?
at least from what I understand or from what I can see, you know, like everybody comes together at the end and we like present this stuff in basically the white cube, or at least that's what it was like, felt like last semester. And also recently, like because now I don't know, because I'm so in limbo with this, like right now, I'm like starting to, sometimes I'm thinking, I'm like, so when I do like my theoretical work, and then I'm like, well, if you do your theoretical work, you know,
You're that disinterested.
yeah, I'm like, I'm like, I don't even know if this is possible for me. How can I, why should I keep putting my brain there or something like this?
Yeah.
But like, I mean, regarding the white cube thing, and like maybe the subject matter that I would have liked to address in the case I could complete some theoretical work. It like recently I am killing myself to write this paper, which is like, it's like, how effective is contemporary art in addressing the issue of climate change? Like to, you know, compel people to like actually take action in their lives, and to really hit them on an emotional level to where every day they'll be like, oh, the planet is in peril. I guess I should change this behavior, you know, kind of thing. And everything that I read about this, like the most effective artworks in like dealing with this, like aren't in the white cube. Like they're in like they're in the public, or they're in the landscape.
Of course they
or they're like right, like
yeah, no shit.
like so I'm like in this school, and I'm just like, I have to defend this work in this gallery setting.
Can't you take the angle of it not being effective? Like, could you kind of like counteract it in the way that you're writing about it? Like present a counter argument?
What, for like climate change?
Yeah. So instead of trying to like play into, I think what they want you to say, which is that there are like, you know, there is some like benefit. Like say instead, no, there isn't. There's no, like, it has no effect. It's actually like not useful or benefiting or like, you know, spreading the message of climate change at all in the contemporary art space.
Oh, I mean, well, I don't know. Like, I think they just want to know like what I think about this issue.
Okay.
And personally, I think, it's not as effective in the white cube space.
Okay.
Definitely.
So you do have the space to like express yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good.
And and of course, and I think of course they want this, you know.
Okay,
but
got you.
They want this, but then also they want you to be like, but this is why, and here's like, here are the footnotes, you know.
Yeah.
So this is like, just like defend. It's challenging to like defend your core beliefs, but I mean, this is like academics, like, so you're defending your core beliefs with like data or something, So, but I was saying that like compared to, you know, what our exams entail, like I'm reading about this like issue and like writing about this issue, and then but in the white cube it's like of the school. I don't know, I'm sure if I like proposed it to somebody, they would let me do some land art or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, sure.
But also like my lack of preparation also comes from like other challenges, like not even related to whether I think like contemporary art that addresses climate change is effective in a white cube. You know?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's really frustrating.
Yeah. So and also I feel like in the academic space, like it's a privileged space to be in. Like regardless of how much I might complain that it's like difficult or costly or whatever, like it is a privileged space to be in. And so I'm like, okay, maybe with this privilege I need to do as much as I can to engage in some social kind of actions.
Potentially, but I also think like if it's I think you're right that it is a space of privilege, and it's probably giving you access to people and institutions that you otherwise might not have access to. But like if you ultimately don't agree with those people and institutions, and it also doesn't fulfill you to like do the work in the way they want you to, then why would you want to be part of it? You know, like I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, it seems useless. It's like it's a waste of your energy.
Yes, like probably, yeah. And that's kind of what I'm struggling with now in this moment,
Yeah.
because I am like reflecting on like different like periods of my career and like heights and lows of my creative experience.
Yeah.
And kind of assessing now where I am like in this institution.
Yeah.
And how it's serving me at this point.
Is it serving you in some way? Like, are there positive aspects of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had some really great workshops. One workshop was like contemporary music as like a art medium or something, something with this title. And yeah, I mean, we were like discussing like, you know, underground music movements that were like
that's
parallel with like contemporary art movements, and there was like a lot of DIY influence. But also at the same time, I'm like, well, Daniel Johnston didn't go to fucking art school. You know?
No,
Like,
definitely not.
So
Yeah, I mean that's the separation always is like you could go and study those
Yeah.
movements and think about them, but all the people who started them
Yes.
were not part of an institution.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So there, I mean, so there's also this, you know, and there's like many factors, and even besides this, like there's like bureaucratic factors. So, but I don't know if I want to get into the details of that.
We don't have to. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have to. It does seem to me like just talking to you now, it seems to me like you feel very like you feel like an impulse to like be making things in the way that you want to make them again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like not feel so constrained creatively, and also not feel this kind of like institutional pressure that's putting you like down a certain path or pointing you in, you know, in a one direction that you might not agree with.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I really am instinctively now like, okay, maybe you should, like, you have this experience, maybe for some time, like, you should, like, step outside of the institution and, like, go back to what you know and just
Yeah.
kind of, like, resettle in this for the time.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be permanent, right? Like, I don't think any decision necessarily has to be a permanent change. Like, if you decided down the line that you wanted to go back, you could, right? I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah. It seems like they are pretty cool about like communicating these types of needs.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate them for that, because from my experience, like studying in the US, they're not so cool, you know?
No, they're not, yeah.
So I appreciate that a lot. And it kind of like curbs my anxiety for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But now, like, exactly at this moment in the institution is like the exact moment where it's like, okay, your exams are here. And I'm like having this existential crisis that I kind of exposed just now, and being like, do I go for the exams and just go for it? Or do I just cut my losses and like come back later.
And leave. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know you that well, and we've only talked about this briefly, but to me it seems like your instinct is pointing you in one very clear direction. And it's just maybe a matter of whether or not you decide to like listen to that instinct, or if you decide to think about it more rationally. I don't know.
Right.
I don't even know that rationally there's that much to say for like staying there necessarily. Like if you really don't feel fulfilled by it and you like feel like constrained, I would say get out. That's my impulse. But that's also the way that I think about things, right? So like I don't know if that would be, I don't know. Maybe that's not right for you.
I mean, I think like constrained, as maybe like ironic as this might sound, like constrained is also an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
But in a certain way. Like
Yeah.
right now, I'll just like speak about my experience. At the moment, I feel very constrained. Financially constrained, because
Sure.
I'm not selling as many paintings as I would like to be. I'm not getting commissions. Like it's like I feel like limited in what I'm able to do creatively because of like, real life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that constraint to me is very motivating, because it's like forcing me to try and come up with solutions to the problem. But like there's a difference between that kind of constraint, which is almost like a constraint that's survival based, which like for me kickstarts something, versus if I was in your situation, I feel like the constraint would be coming from like above, from other people or some institute. And that kind of constraint to me actually makes me go back inside myself. Like I don't feel motivated by that kind of constraint.
Sure. Man, I really can relate to this too, because I mean, now I should be like fully motivated. Like I should be ready to work now, like the clock is ticking and I'm seriously like, why?
Yeah.
And that's not really, I don't think that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've been trying to like address this with them for a long time, but like part of me is like, you can do it. And then the other part of me is like this instinct, And so I've been kind of like fighting with this for now weeks, maybe like months even, and mostly going towards like, you can do it. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess like regardless of being constrained or not, like the biggest concern is this like struggle that I'm having with the motivation and the fact that because it's a group exhibition, obviously we work in a group and I won't have like the motivation to even like pull my weight for like others in this setting. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So, I mean, regardless of like my instincts, it's just like I feel like I'm on the floor. You know?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah.
But what I was saying is like I did now open the conversation again to about like transparency of my situation, like, and I don't know, I also have this fear that's like I don't want people, and maybe I shouldn't care, but I don't want people to think that the decisions I make are from like lack of care. Like this is really something like, oh, well, she just didn't like care enough or something.
Sure.
And like, I struggle with that.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
So that's what like gives me anxiety about maybe having this conversation with them, like, or that I'm giving up, or that I'm giving up, or that I don't care.
Yeah.
But also,
well, do you care?
Yeah. Wasn't very convincing.
No, not at all.
I mean, what I care about is like the longevity of my career.
You care about making art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and being able to keep doing it or like to sustain, you know?
Definitely.
Even if like the capacity to do it is like small, but like the sustain, like it's still moving.
Absolutely.
You
yeah.
know?
It's about like, for me as well, it's not about the size of it or the reach of it. It's about
Yeah.
being able to continue. Like, I want to be able to like, and I mean, I don't think further ahead than a week from now, but like, if I can keep painting next week, I'm happy. I'll be okay.
Sure.
Right. And then
Yeah.
hopefully the week after, I'll still be able to.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. That's a really tough situation to be in. And it seems like you kind of have to make a decision soon, right?
Yeah, I decided that I'm going to make this decision like this week.
Okay.
So that's that's like the thing that's been going on in my creative journey so far.
Yeah. I have a couple questions for you, but before I ask you them, I do want to just say a little bit, because I feel like when I first met you, we talked about this very briefly as well. But like something that I feel grateful for, and part of the reason why I am still here in Prague is that I feel like there is a growing community of creative people who are trying to make art and do it because they really care about it and not go the white cube route, but to actually bring it like into like lived in spaces in the city. And like I think it's a lot more community oriented, a lot more DIY.
Sure.
And like that scene to me is like, I feel lucky to be part of it, and I feel like it's only growing. Like I'm meeting more and more people who have that inclination. And so I don't know if like part of what you're like the fear you're feeling or like the anxiety about making the decision is like this kind of worry that there won't be an alternative, but I do think there is one here.
Yeah.
And like I also think like knowing me or other people and like starting to build that community together is definitely a possibility. And so like I don't know if that helps you at all, but it's definitely there.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really reassuring, because also in considering this decision, like I do also worry about this too. Like I'm like, oh well, without the school, like maybe I will like be alone again in this, or maybe I won't have like something else motivating me. I mean, that's not been the case yet. I always find the motivation somewhere. And the thing which compels me to maybe like move away from something is like the lack of motivation.
Yeah, sure. And you might actually discover more motivation moving away from your current situation.
Sure. That's like how the saying goes, right? Like, I don't know, things maybe sometimes don't work out for a reason because there's like something better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like to move in the world with this.
It's reassuring.
Yes.
It makes life a little bit easier to think that way. Yeah.
And that's good to know. And I can see that. It's like really cool what you do here. And I watched a few of your podcasts and it's really well done.
Yeah,
like,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Work in progress, but yeah.
So far it's really well done. I have to say,
you.
like I was like, oh, he's really good at this video thing, and he's really good at talking. Like, wow.
The thing is, I'm really good at talking like in intimate situations. Like one-on-one, I can handle that, and like I like this format because I just love talking about creativity. So it's like comes pretty naturally to me. But I still feel like it's very much a work in progress. But I mean, like the whole aesthetic of this podcast and everything. And it's not just me. It's like everyone, all the people I'm working with, the people I know here. It's really like we're trying to be as grassroots as possible. And like we have this attitude of like being like we've had some like bites and requests from like galleries and spaces that are a little bit more, let's say, like accepted by the art institution here. And we've said no and we will continue to, because I think we really want to make a statement about like building community through art and doing it in a way that is like also supported by the community, as opposed to kind of like taking this fork and deciding to maybe there's more money there, maybe there's more notoriety.
Sure.
Well, there's definitely more money there, but it's like for me, I don't know, I'm an idealist, and like I'm going to stick to that kind of like moral compass that I have, because also like for me it's way more fulfilling to do it that way. Like I gain so much more from it. And like it's also helped me realize that the value is not necessarily for me about like being in a big fancy gallery or like I don't know, getting the validation from an honestly like an institution or like a I don't know. Like I don't agree with a lot of what they think is art or what they think is valuable the way that they operate. And so like why would I want to be ingratiated by them? You know,
Sure.
it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, that's I lost my train of thought in
fine.
that, but I mean, I think it's like I said, like I think it's really cool what you do here, and that you started this podcast and your collective and everything, and I've really enjoyed like seeing it develop since I've known you.
Yeah, sure.
And like it's really cool that you invited me. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, I know we only met once, but I knew that. I mean, like you were a very creative person, like so I knew that you would be a good guest on the podcast. Yeah,
Awesome.
And I also love just like bringing people together a little bit more. You know?
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe this is a good time for you to have this conversation, and you know, like yeah.
You know, I was also thinking that I was like, you know, because I was like kind of telling you earlier that I don't know if I wanted to like kind of talk about what I'm like going through if what I'm feeling in the institution.
Yeah.
But also now that you mentioned that, before we met, and kind of what I was thinking about maybe we would talk about is in reflection to that, I was like, wow, it's a really interesting time for me to be here having this dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I, you know, sometimes in the same way that like sometimes something doesn't work out for a reason, sometimes things work out for a reason, right? Like the timing of something. So anyway,
right.
Very hard pivot, but I would love to talk to you about painting because you said you're a painter as well.
Sure.
And I've never seen any of your paintings. I would love to see some at some point.
Okay.
But maybe like just tell me about like what your approach to painting is, what kind of painting you do.
Yeah. Okay. So my experience is like with acrylic. Like, I guess this is kind of what I started out on, and I feel like probably a lot of people start out on acrylic. And I was painting like more figuratively for a long time, and I didn't really. Not so much abstraction.
Sure.
The abstraction actually, if you looked at my work like in a timeline, you can see that like the abstraction kind of like developed later, and it actually came after I had more like design insights. So like the abstraction was actually like a result of like my design instinct, like my newly developing design instincts or something. And then also I discovered during my development as a painter that I'm really strong with like the dry pastels. Like I can get really good really nice results with this. Like
I hate pastels.
Yeah, you know,
they're so frustrating to me.
Sure, and I say this because I think it's frustrating for a lot of people, and actually before somebody showed me how to like work with this material, I really was like, I don't know, how do you use this? You know.
Yeah.
And so, like I was taught in how to use it, and for me, it worked really well. Like, I was getting nice feedback about it from my instructors, like, oh, you have like a knack for charcoal. And I'm like, that's cool, because before I met you, I was really scared of charcoal, so thanks. Like,
that's awesome.
You know, but lately, I didn't make a painting in a long time.
How long has it been?
Probably a couple years.
Wow.
Like, I mean, I'm doing like some drawing and stuff, but like as a really like kind of foundational thing. Like, for example, one thing that I really love about the school is that we do have like workshops that I would never be able to access like anywhere else. For example, like lithography.
So
this is like hardcore.
Oh my gosh.
This is hardcore, you know, like
I've always wanted to do lithography.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
So they have like a proper like lithography setup there. And these guys are like really like in the craft. And so basically like the closest thing I've done to painting recently was just like this learning lithography.
Yeah, sure.
Which is really great, and I would love to become more I would love actually if like I was like a lithography, craftsman.
Yeah,
That would be
absolutely.
really great.
It would be so cool.
Yeah.
I went to an exhibition, I think it was 2 summers ago now. It was a Czech artist. His name is Jiří Šalamoun. I don't know if you know him, but I have one of his books upstairs. But he did a lot of lithographs. And that was like one of the first times that I'd actually seen like an exhibition that was primarily lithographs. And I was obsessed with it for weeks. And so I was just like researching lithography and like trying to figure out a way to like get into a place where they had all the equipment. And I just like, it's so hard, I feel like, without having the, if you don't have like a space to do it and you're not working with someone who knows what they're doing,
Sure.
it's like there's a lot of barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Much more than just painting or drawing.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's like this, just like the general like material fact of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like slabs of limestone, like
insane, I know.
and giant like steel presses.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, so I can say that this has been like a real gift, and that's like the closest thing that I've done to painting recently. And then the last actual painting that I did now was a year ago, which is a long time, especially for someone I think who wants to maybe call themselves a painter,
Yeah, sure.
because all the painters I knew and from what I can tell about you, are painting every day. Like it's a practice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this was the last time that I couldn't say that I did like a proper painting. So most recently I've just done printmaking.
Okay.
And
what's like your approach to painting? Because I feel like you seem much more multidisciplinary than I am, in the sense that you've kind of dipped your toe into lots of different creative mediums. What does painting give you that photography doesn't? Or like what are you able to say in painting that you can't through some through performance or printmaking?
in painting, it's like, I mean, the foundations are like the colors, and like this. I think this is like the real expression, and like the application of like the material.
Yeah, yeah.
So but I haven't always been able to like activate in painting, like. So I think in terms of like the different media and like what I'm able to convey with each, like with the photography, it's like much more straightforward and true, but like unique in the way that it is like my vision,
It's
like
your point of view,
it's,
basically.
yeah, it's like my own point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the painting, it's like to capture the essence through like the application of the colors and like really rendering like the darks in contrast to lights, because I did start to get like more abstracted, but like I'm still like figural.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And just kind of like experimenting, and like the experimentation and like control of like the value ranges is like more accessible, because like and also I can capture in photography, but because it's like new for me, like I don't know like different photography methods like so well, and I don't know like different like processes of like developing so well, and like different formats so well, like.
Yeah. And I also think if you're talking about like value or light in photography, like it's something that you have less control over, in the sense that you're a little bit more beholden to the subject that you're photographing, versus in a painting. What I like about it is that you do have a lot of control over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and in photography too, I mean, the lighting conditions like also have to be there. And now this is less, it's like not as much of a problem because of digital photography.
Sure, yeah.
But even if the lighting conditions aren't ideal in digital photography, it can't like capture everything so easily, you know? And so, yeah, I think in like overall painting and drawing does give you a lot more control. Like if you're able to channel it.
Yeah.
And actually that was something that I was thinking about, like, also as I was like, well, in the case that I like do leave the program, I can be painting again.
You can.
Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Which might feel really good if you haven't painted
Right.
in over a year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And it would be interesting to see how your paintings are different now after so much space. Because like I mean, I've painted pretty consistently the past 5 years, but there was about a year or so when I was working like a full-time job here when I first moved back, and like I was like not painting very much. I would say like maybe once a month or something. Like I'd spend a couple days working on a painting.
Sure.
And during that time, like not painting and then going back into it, like things changed a lot for me. Like when I re-entered that space,
Yeah.
It was honestly weird. It was kind of a strange experience. It's not what I expected, because to me it's like the working on it every day and practicing. It's what's going to contribute to like an evolution.
Yes.
But it was actually the space that I needed in order to like approach it from a different perspective and to like see
Yeah.
painting and approach painting differently. So
Sure.
I would not be surprised if you had kind of a similar experience.
Yeah. This, I'm like aware of this. Like, maybe I can appreciate now more like this space in a more valuable and positive way.
Yeah.
Because like alternatively, I have a lot of anxiety about coming back after such a long time.
Sure.
But it was always like this. It was like, oh, I spent so much time away from this. Like, do you even have the skills anymore? Like, did they just like deteriorate, you know?
Yeah.
But actually that is something that I felt, maybe it's like less true in like drawing and painting, because whenever I return to this after like long periods of times, I always like surprise myself at how much I retain and how like I'm still really in tune with like materials.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like how they work on the paid plane. And so I'm always I always like surprise myself in this way anytime that I stepped away and then came back. But the thing about the photography is like when I actually take time away from this, like I know when I came back that it's like not as strong, or it doesn't
Really?
feel, at least maybe it's not that I know, maybe I'm like too like hard on myself or something, but like I feel, yeah, I just, when I'm like first returning to it after a long time, I'm like, oh, it's not as good, or it's
Wow.
it's not like I need to get back into like the swing of this.
Yeah. That's interesting to me. I'm not enough of a photographer to say that I can like relate to that experience. I wonder where it comes from, where that difference is. Because like I don't know how painting is for you, but for me it's like a very almost instinctual thing. And so I feel like the skill set of being comfortable with the materials and working on a canvas, working on some kind of figurative piece of art, is like something I don't think I would ever lose, even if I left it for a long period of time. And I wonder if there's something different about the approach to photography, because there is like, at least for me, it feels a little bit less like connected to my body and like my feelings in a way. Like there's almost a barrier in between because of the camera.
Yeah.
And I wonder if maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the camera as a tool actually like really is part of this, or maybe really is why it feels like this.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like I think it really is something about the camera as a tool, and then also the different kinds of cameras. Like I think there's like a different feeling and like learning curve with like every type of camera. I mean, the fundamentals are the same, of course, but you know, like the operating system from like Canon to Sony,
Yeah.
it like varies.
It is different, yeah.
And
It's
then additionally, like I don't even consider like DSLR, like digital photography, the same even as like SLR or like film photography.
It's totally different, yeah.
Like, you know, it arguably is like not even the same art form.
Yeah, there's a huge difference, yeah.
Yeah, so and that was kind of, and in terms of photography too, that's like another thing about the institution, because like the studio I'm in is photography, but it's like it's not what like maybe most people would think of like as photography, like you know, shooting subjects, like making prints,
Sure.
like typical subject matter. It's like it's really conceptual, and half the time it's not even like photography, you know, it's like sculptures or like multimedia or
Okay.
like some deconstruction of like some idea with like an alternative materials or something.
Yeah, sure. And what's your take on like the conceptual approach to art? Like, is that something you like, or is it something that you don't? I don't know.
I like this. I resonate with it for its like quality, like because I think it's useful in like activist art, or like its ability to like encourage like activism, or like its ability to like critique society. Like,
Yeah,
I think this is valuable, but also for me personally, like when it's so conceptual, I really am like, man, I am not literate enough. Like, I did not read enough. I gotta read. I don't have the time, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that I don't already know.
Yeah. I don't know. That pressure to be like literate, like you're saying, in
Yes.
order to make conceptual art, to me is like seems a little bit like gatekeeping in a way.
Yeah.
Like it limits people from being able to participate in that kind of making.
Sure. And I think that this is also the argument which can be applied to like trying to inspire people to engage in climate change, like positive climate change, like behavior, like is because like, yeah, this like conceptual, like high art, it is kind of a form of gatekeeping, because not everybody, most people can't interpret these things.
The vast majority can't.
Yeah.
And also don't have access to them.
Sure.
And like that element of exclusivity is something that I really don't, it doesn't sit right with me. Like the idea of like locking art, conceptual art, fine art up into this like space that's elevated above the rest of the world in a way, where it's like you have to be part of a certain class of people or have a certain level of education in order to even like enter and understand it on a basic level. I think that's what turns so many people away from art, as opposed to like you're saying, like having, you know, something that have a piece of art that can be conceptual and has a message about climate change, but then place it in an environment where it's like people are interacting with it in a much more real kind of organic way.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a way better way to get a message across, because otherwise it's like basically like preaching to a room of people who, like a tiny room of people who will understand you, who aren't the people you're trying to reach to begin with. It's just like this endless loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of like all of the same kind of institutional people just talking back and forth to each other. And to me, that has no value.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. So I don't know. I guess I'm maybe looking forward to re-entering the realm of DIY.
Hell yeah. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. By the way, we're going to wrap it up here, but I
Okay.
wanted to say that I listened to some of your music. I don't remember which band it was. I feel like you've been in multiple bands,
Yeah.
but I really loved it. Like, it's
Oh,
awesome. It's so
thanks.
cool. There was one song that I loved, especially about a Rolik.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I listened to that like 10 times in a row. It's so funny.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad you like it.
Yeah, it was amazing. So much energy, such a funny like concept as well, which like really drew my attention. Yeah, I was sharing it with a lot of my friends. You should keep making music too.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. I also need to hear this because like in the process of me being like, oh, the institution, I'm like, man, I don't even like I'm not even doing my band. You know?
Yeah. But I don't know, like there's been periods in my life where like I really felt like I was putting too much of my time and energy into things that weren't me,
Yes.
right? And it was, even if it was practical and it was like, this is going to be good for me in the long run, like I'm the kind of person where that sucks so much out of me that it ends up feeling almost like not worthwhile.
Yeah.
Like I need to have my hands in things that are like my own expression, my own vision, whatever it is. And if you have like multiple ways of doing that with music and painting and photography and all of the like, and you're not doing any of it, then I can understand why you would maybe feel a little bit stuck where you are right now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that, I guess. And that's exciting about that you are sharing my band around. That's cool.
Oh, hell yeah.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Amazing. Is there anything you'd like to add at the end before we wrap up?
No, but thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you for coming. And maybe we'll get an update in a few months. You can do episode 2 and let us know what you decided.
Sure. Great.
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. Thank you,
Thanks.
Shira.
Mhm.